In 1922, before the main Cradley Memorial was erected, a private memorial commemorating the fallen of the First World War was made by the then parish church schools in Cradley Churchyard. This took the form of an Avenue of Remembrance, lined by lime trees, leading from the entrance on Homer Hill to an oak cross, a memorial stone situated at the junction of the old and new burial grounds. 60 lime trees and an additional 60 poplar trees were planted in the churchyard. The December the 23rd edition of the County Express describes in detail the memorial and accompanying dedication ceremony.
A memorable event, unique in the history of the district, took place at Cradley on Saturday afternoon, when a large, plain cross and a memorial stone, erected in a circular bed at the spot where the old and new burial grounds meet, were dedicated by the vicar, the Reverend R.A. Norris, in memory of the 60 old boys of the parish church schools who fell in the Great War. Following the dedication ceremony, which was preceded by a short service in the church, 60 trees, each supported by a stake bearing the name of one of the old boys, were planted by relatives or friends of the fallen. The whole scheme very effectively forms what is aptly described as an Avenue of Remembrance. The cross has been given by former headmaster Mr. Joseph Jacquis, and engraved on the stone is the inscription, "To the glory of God and the everlasting memory of the 60 old scholars of the church schools who fell in the Great War, 1914 to 1918. These trees were planted and this stone erected by their old schoolfellows, December the 16th, 1922.
The Avenue of Remembrance had been organised and paid for by the old scholars, teachers and friends of the church schools. To most of those in that congregation, the names of the men they were commemorating were very familiar. They had perhaps played and worked with them and shared their joys and sorrows. The schoolyard once rang with the laughter of those brave men, and it was in the schools that they learnt those lessons which brought forth the magnificent qualities and characteristics which prompted the response we saw in 1914, when those valiant boys proudly gathered, rank on rank, to war. The Reverend Norris told the congregation of St. Peter's Church,
"There are 3 things to remember when you see the memorial. First, at the end of the avenue is a strong oak cross. There is no war memorial so fitting and symbolic of the service and lives of those men of Cradley than a cross. Second, on each side of the avenue there will be planted lime trees, and the sweet summer foliage will remind you of many gracious acts of chivalry those men did overseas. Thirdly, there will stand further down Homer Hill Road a number of straight tall poplars. These trees will be an example of uprightness and strength, and will remind everyone who sees them that the men they commemorate will someday rise again."
The vicar then read aloud the names of the 60 men, and afterwards offered an appropriate prayer, followed by the singing of the hymn, "O Valiant Hearts." All present then marched in procession to the new burial ground, where the dedication and tree planting ceremonies took place. The huge assembly formed a thick circle around the oak cross, and the ceremony began. The last post and the reveille were sounded by a bugler, and the proceedings closed with the first verse of the national anthem. The relatives and friends then planted the trees allotted to them, the procedure being watched by a large number of interested people. The entire cost of the trees was defrayed by the proceeds from the concert Agatha by the Primitive Methodist Dramatic Society, nearly all the performers being old scholars of the church schools. An invitation in the form of a card was sent to the relatives of the men to be remembered, on which was the number of the tree allotted to that man and the position of the tree in the graveyard. Today, most of the poplar trees facing the front fence along Homer Hill Road have not survived nature, but some 46 lime trees still remain in the area of the memorial. Although the article in the County Express stated that there were 60 men remembered, the present-day plaque in the Cradley Church of England School only carries 53 names. The pupils of Cradley schools continue to hold a ceremony close to Remembrance Day, the 11th of November, when they gather to remember the fallen in all wars.